Hi, in this session, we are going to go over the JavaScript data types. Now, what are data types? So, data types are different type of data that can be stored in a variable. We already saw a couple of data types in our previous examples, which was variable number is equals to 10. So, this was of type number. Similarly, we also saw something called as a string, which was in a double quotes, I am a string. So these two were the data types that we have already seen. Now what are the other data types that are there in JavaScript? Let me show you. There is another data type called array, and what does array means is, it means a collection of strings or a collection of items. It can be of any other data type as well. So let's say we have 3 cars. We have a Mercedes, we have a BMW, and we have a Volvo. So this is a data type called array. Let me quickly write it in the comments here. It is number, string, and array. There is another data type called as an object. Now what is an object? An object is denoted with a curly braces. It is of the form key and a value. So key colon value. And now this object can have many such key value pairs. So for example, let's see how a person's profile would be, where we have a first name equals to John, comma, last name equals Doe. So this is an object. If you recollect, we already saw type of operator in our previous lecture. Let's try to put it to use and see what the data type is returned using JavaScript. So let's put number, which we know it's number, and then we will do a type of number. Similarly, I'll do text, type of text. Let me just copy paste it so it becomes easier. So we have cars, we have X, and we have X. Let's try to run this program and see what happens. So the first thing is 10, which is number, and you see there's a number. The next is I am a string, and the data type is string. The next is an object, array, and the type is object. The next is an object, and you can see type is object. Now JavaScript has dynamic types. Now what do I mean by that? So let me show you an example where I had variable x as an object. Now if I define variable x equals to 10 and do a type of once again, I should be getting that variable x is of type number. Let's run this example and see. You see that? So it has dynamic types, which means depending on the data that it stores, it will be dynamically of that particular type. We also have another data type, and it's called a boolean. Let's see what a boolean can do. So variable condition is equal to true. Now let's try to print out what condition says. And if you recollect, when we were dealing with the operators and we had logical operators, I had mentioned that your conditions will be evaluated to a true or a false. And that was nothing but a data type of boolean. You can see the value is true and the type is boolean. Now there are multiple ways of writing a number. So we already saw that we wrote a number as a 10, but is there a way that we can write number 1 is equals to 10.35, and that's very applicable. We can also have exponential format, which means we can denote numbers which are very high in range or very low in range with exponents. So let's try to do that. Let's just call expo, and let's give this the value of 1, 2, 3, E5. Now what this would be is, this would be a number and it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Similarly, variable expo1, we can give it a value of 123 e minus 5. And what this would be is, you write 123 and move it 5 decimals. So 123, move it 5 decimals. So you had 0, you had 0, and then it's a decimal point out here, 0 point this. You can write exponentially large or exponentially low numbers using this format. We already talked about arrays. Let's use the same array and see what we can do with it. As we saw, it's an object. JavaScript arrays are zero based, which means that the first item or the first index will be a 0. So let's try to do this. So console.log cars of 0. Now the bracket and the 0 indicates that give me the data which is sitting on the 0th element in that array. Let's try to print it on the screen and see if even we get a result or no. And you see the answer is Merc. Now similarly, I can do a 1 and see what the answer is. The answer is BMW. So now that we have seen arrays, let's quickly see what objects are and how we can use objects to get the data from them. For example, let's create an object person that consists of first name John, comma, last name Doe, age 25, and date of birth as 2016 minus 25 is 1986. So let's say 1986. That's 20 years. So 25. Okay, 81. And let's close to that. Now, if we need to get the data from the object, what we can do is we can do a person dot first name, and I should be able to see the data John onto the screen. And it's undefined. Well, the reason it's undefined is because there's a typo. It's first name. Let's try to run again. And the answer is John. Let's change his first name. Probably let's add another thing, which is the last name. And last name. Let's try to run again and it should give me Doe. Similarly, I can type in the age, person dot age. Usually the objects are used to build a profile or probably a set of related attributes or variables together. So just like a person can have a first name, last name, age, and a date of birth, similarly you can have objects. Let's say we have a car has gears, has tires, and things like that. And that's the way we get object orientation into picture. You know that this particular object will have this particular attribute. Let's see another important aspect of JavaScript, which is probably not much talked about, but I think it's very important to discuss. It's called undefined and null. So what happens when you say a variable, let's say Abhay. Now this variable will be undefined because that's the default value. Now what if I do Abhay is equals to some text? Well, it will be having the string value. Now what if I just do Abhay equals to empty string? In this case, it will still be a string, but it will be an empty string. Now, if I really need something to be empty, I can either say it is undefined or I can call it as a null. Null means nothing. Now, when I do this and I do a console log null, I should see null being displayed. However, when you do a type of null, you would assume that it would be undefined. But the type of null is actually something else. It's an object. Let's see how it is. You see that? That's an object. Let's try the same thing with undefined. Let's run it. In this case, the type of undefined is undefined, but type of null is an object. You may call this as a bug in JavaScript, but you have to be very conscious when you give any value as a null versus an undefined. You need to know what your purpose is.